Donald J. Trump was burning in money. It was the beginning of 2016, and he was lending tens of millions of dollars for his presidential campaign and was spending large amounts to expand the list of high-level properties of the Trump Organization. To finance the growth of his business, Trump turned to a long-standing ally, Deutsche Bank, one of the few banks that is still willing to lend money to the man who called himself the king of debt. Trump's loan application, which was not reported previously, triggered a fight that reached the top of the German bank, according to 3 people familiar with the request. In the end, the Deutsche Bank did something unexpected. Did not say. Senior bank officials, including his future CEO, believed that Trump's candidacy made the loan very risky, the people said. Among his concerns was the fact that if Trump won the election and then stopped paying, Deutsche Bank would have to choose between not collecting the debt or apprehending the assets of the President of the United States. 2 of the people familiar with the loan application said the Trump office was trying to take out loans against their Miami complex to pay for work on a golf property in Turnberry, Scotland. Trump Organization spokeswoman Amanda Miller denied that the company needed external funding for Turnberry. "This story is absolutely false," Miller said. "We bought the Trump Turnberry without any funding and put tens of millions of dollars of our own money into the renovation, which started in 2014. At no time was any money needed to finance the purchase or the reform of Trump Turnberry." He did not specifically talk about whether the Trump Organization had sought a loan from Deutsche Bank. Troy Gravitt, a spokesman for Deutsche Bank, declined to comment. The unsuccessful loan application is a chapter not mentioned in Trump's long and torturing relationship with the banking sector. This shows that he was actively engaged in running his business in the midst of the presidential campaign, and is likely to attract scrutiny from Democrats in 2 House committees that are investigating his 2-decade relationship with Deutsche Bank. In the early 1990s, Trump's hotel and casino properties declared bankruptcy 4 times, leaving prominent banks, including Citicorp and Hanover Makers, with painful losses. The real estate magnate was practically excommunicated from Wall Street. Deutsche Bank, which was eager to win a position in the lucrative U.S. market and more risk-tolerant than many of its rivals, filled the void. In 1998, he lent Trump $125 million for renovations in a Wall Street skyscraper. The relationship flourished and, in the following 17 years, Deutsche Bank lent or participated in loans for Trump and its companies, totaling more than $2,500 million. So the first votes were cast in the Republican presidential primaries. Trump's last resort creditor was left with fear. The financing of Trump's golf empire has been a mystery. In the decade before his election as president, Trump's company spent hundreds of millions of dollars buying or renovating nearly a dozen clubs and resorts around the world. Despite Trump's self-proclaimed preference for relying on debt, the Trump Organization reported using its own money for most acquisitions and upgrades. A prominent golf journalist, James Dodson, said Trump's son, Eric, told him in 2013 that the company's golf properties were financed by Russians. Eric Trump denied making the comment. Mr. Trump loaned money for some of his golf properties. In 2012, Deutsche Bank lent the Trump Organization a total of more than $100 million to finance the 72-hole Doral complex near Miami, home of the famous Blue Monster course. 2 years later, the Trump Organization bought the Turnberry Hotel and the golf course for $63 million. The course, which has dazzling views of the sea in western Scotland, has received the British Open several times. In 2014 and 2015, a legal entity Trump loaned at least $96 million for the subsidiary that operated Turnberry, according to British regulatory records. The following year, the Trump Organization would return to Deutsche Bank for more. The relationship between Mr. Trump and Deutsche Bank has survived some difficult times. In 2008, in the midst of the financial crisis, Trump stopped paying a loan to finance the construction of a skyscraper in Chicago, and then prosecuted the bank, accusing it of helping to cause the crisis. After that process, the arm of investment banks of Deutsche Bank cut the ties with Trump. But in 2010, he went back to doing business with Deutsche Bank through his private bank unit, which catered to some of the richest people in the world. That unit organized the Doral loans, and another, in 2012, linked to the Chicago skyscraper. Mr. Trump's entry into the private bank was Rosemary Vrablic, a senior bank in his office in New York. In 2013, she was the subject of a flattering profile in the Mortgage Observer, a real estate magazine owned by Mr. Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who was also among his clients. In 2015, she arranged the loan that financed the Trump transformation of the old Washington Post building in the Trump International Hotel, a few blocks from Pennsylvania Avenue, in the White House. In early 2016, when Trump was lending tens of millions of dollars for his campaign, his company contacted Ms. Vrablic about getting money for Turnberry, said two of the three people familiar with the request, who spoke on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss the matter publicly. The proposal was to expand the outstanding loans of Deutsche Bank, supported by Doral, by more than $10 million and use the resources for work in Turnberry, the people said. At the time that Trump was winning New Hampshire, South Carolina and Nevada, private bank officials told their superiors that they were inclined to provide the loan, according to one of the people familiar with the internal discussions. Senior New York executives rejected, arguing that Trump's candidacy made that loan unacceptably risky, said the three people. In part, they feared that the bank's reputation could be jeopardized if the transaction became public because of the polarized statements Trump was making in the campaign. The authorities at the private banking unit protested that Deutsche Bank already had several outstanding loans to Trump and that there was no reason not to do another, said two people. The decision was appealed to the main executives of Deutsche Bank in Frankfurt. This was the first time that some senior officials perceived the extent of their bank transactions with Trump, the three people said. The proposed loan was examined by an internal committee that is responsible for examining the transactions to ensure they do not pose serious risks to the bank's reputation, the people said. In that month of March, the committee unanimously rejected the loan. Christian Sewing, head of the Wealth Management Division of Deutsche Bank and who would become chief executive 2 years later, was among those who made the final decision, the people said. A Trump entity ended up lending at least $45 million to Turnberry that year, in addition to the $96 million it lent to Turnberry in the previous 2 years. Although the Deutsche Bank loan has not passed, it will probably attract the interest of the Democrats in Congress. Deputy Adam Schiff, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, which is investigating Russian efforts to interfere with the 2016 election, said he wants to closely examine Deutsche Bank because of its past involvement in money laundering for citizens. Russians and Democrats in the House Financial Services Committee, overseen by Rep. Maxine Waters, have asked questions about Deutsche Bank's loans to Trump since 2017. Schiff and Waters plan to conduct a joint investigation of Trump's involvement with Deutsche Bank. During the campaign, Trump tried to take advantage of that relationship when rivals painted him as a bad businessman who was frozen out of the conventional financial system. In the same month that Deutsche Bank rejected the loan proposal, Trump tried to liven up those attacks by citing his warm relationships with Wall Street companies. Highlighted the Deutsche Bank. "They are totally happy with me," he told the New York Times in March 2016. "I do business with them today.